Hello and welcome back everybody to the Foodbuild factory, where today we're going to take a look at the Big Bend Sentinel. That's the guy you can see on screen right now, and as always I'm going to show you some gameplay in the first half of the video, and in the second half of the video we're going to take a look at the perks, mutations, equipments and everything else. So what I wanted to take a look at with this build in particular is I wanted to make another take on basically a heavy gunner using vats, which is something I have done in the past, and yeah, it's certainly not the first time I've done it, but this time around I wanted to center my character around the gatling gun, which is one of my favorite weapons in the game. I mean, I say that a lot. Pretty much every time I make a video I say, oh, this is one of my favorite weapons and everything, but I mean, it's always up to change, just because, yeah, things change in the game and so on. But what I like about the gatling gun is it was a day one addition to the game, and I have always admired it for its solidness. It's aggressively mediocre, and that's what I like about it. See, it's one of those heavy weapons that can be used in so many different ways, and using different legendary effects it can be transformed heavily. You can actually use this as a very powerful option. You can actually bring the DPS up quite a little bit by using a faster fire rate version of this thing. And what I wanted to take a look at today, as I said, is using it in vats. And that's basically where my love for this weapon came from, because when the game came out I was always drawn to the odd builds, which is probably pretty obvious looking at my channel. So this time around, using heavy guns with vats was always kind of a hard thing to do, and for the most part it's just a bad idea, looking at stuff like miniguns and gatling lasers. So pretty much everything that has a charge up, to this day I have not really found a way to use them with vats. There have always been weapons like the gatling gun that kind of worked. I mean, you can kind of get around with using something like a 50 cal and death claw, which, sure, why not, let's fight a death claw here. But yeah, from day one the best weapon, heavy weapon for vats gameplay was the gatling gun. Nowadays we do have a very solid option, which is the plasma caster, which is definitely a weapon I have shown off more than once on this channel, and I actually have shown off a power armor, a heavy gunner using vats with the gatling gun, but that's quite a while ago, and I slowly want to start to basically take a look at builds I have done in the past, for the simple reason that nowadays I have a little bit better quality in my videos. Not by far, but let's face it, you're not here for content quality or something. In fact, I'm not quite sure why you're here, but thanks anyways. But yeah, that being said, last time I was using this weapon here was with power armor. Not quite sure, I think it was called the Cultist Heavy, thinking about it, which was a build I was really enjoying. But back at the time we didn't even have legendary power armor and so on, so I basically just centered the whole build around giving myself good AP refresh with the core assembly modification on power armor. But yeah, this time around we're outside of power armor, so the one big thing we are missing is stabilized, meaning we miss quite a lot of armor penetration. But if there's a heavy weapon where you can get away with that, it's probably the gatling gun, for the simple reason that rather than focusing completely on DPS, we are actually having quite a blast with pretty heavy hitting shots, but not the highest fire rate. So that's why, yeah, armor penetration isn't as big of a problem as it is with other weapons. And one thing I haven't really talked about so far is pretty much, yeah, you can see that on screen. The weapon is actually way better in vats than one might expect, unless you probably have used it. Now, this doesn't come right off the bat, to be honest, so you have to invest a little bit into it, but it's really not that much. So the main thing basically that makes this possible here is the less vats cost legendary effect on the weapon. I have experimented a little bit with other stuff, so the first take on this weapon was to give it a little bit of a different edge compared to the last one, to just use the vats crits filling faster effect and basically get a crit on every second shot, something I have done in the past definitely. But while it was fun, it had a little bit of a problem when it came to bosses, or, well, I mean bosses obviously, but not even bosses, but tougher targets, like this here Scorched Beast. Now on this occasion I hope we do get a little bit lucky so that he lands sooner rather than later, because this is not the ideal situation we want to find ourselves in, meaning fighting a moving target over higher range, but now he's landed and I think we can down him pretty soon. So one thing you'll see is that we are using a executioner's weapon, so it goes a little bit slower at the beginning, but once we're passing down to 40% health of the enemy, it will be a very short death indeed, and we're soon there. So every now and then you do have to wait a little bit to refresh your action points when it comes to enemies like this. But one thing we can do is chuck a Nuka-Cola, which is something we are actually quite good at. Not meaning the chugging part, because that's not something we can actually skill into, but yeah, the actual benefits we do get from Nuka-Cola. Long story short, we do have Cola Nut, but that's, yeah, pretty much it. Now another big thing about this weapon, which was a really big benefit from day one actually, is its ammo efficiency. So when it comes to ammo efficiency, I think hands down there's not a better weapon in the game. There are quite a few weapons that are pretty good when it comes to ammo efficiency, but yeah, the gatling gun is probably the most efficient one. What I'm talking about is we are using 5mm rounds, which are super easy to craft compared to other ones. You really get quite a lot when crafting them. And by the way, I'm not quite sure when finally the mole rats are going to stop following me, but yeah, anyways, back to the topic. Yeah, we're crafting 5mm rounds, which are easy to get in quite a mess, and yeah, just because it's rather hard hitting and doesn't have the highest fire rate, this weapon here actually is very conservative when it comes to the consumption of ammo. And yeah, overall that makes it a very ammo efficient weapon for people that just don't want to bother to farm for crafting materials all day. So that's a very big benefit. And other than that, yeah, I mean, what else is there to say about the build? Maybe we can talk about the armor a little bit. I wanted to make this guy relatively tanky because, as you can imagine, being outside of power armor, and we're not exactly designed for very long range fighting, so we're basically good at mid to low range combat. So yeah, being hit every now and then is just a part of what we're going to have to live with. I'm not quite sure if that was an actual sentence, but you get the point. On this occasion we are quite lucky that there was no Assaultron here. The Assaultron, yeah, thinking about it, I haven't really thought about it beforehand and haven't really fought one with this build. Thinking about it, yeah, Assaultron probably one of the tougher targets with this build. We're not particularly great when it comes to energy resistance. However, there's room for improvement. I'm gonna talk about that later. And back to the armor. What I wanted to actually say about it is we are using a full set of Sentinel's armor. So as a third effect, we do have Sentinels, meaning that we have a chance to reduce incoming damage when standing still. So in a lot of situations you will see that I'm not actually bothering too much with staying still, but it's especially going to happen just when we are fighting ranged enemies. So we will see that when we'll be fighting super mutants just in a few minutes, where we just, yeah, basically take up position in the middle of a few super mutants and then we're going to start blasting them. It's something you have to get a little bit used to. I mean, there's a lot of people who use Sentinel's armor, and I think for them it's probably as simple as just breathing, but for me it's a very counterintuitive thing, just standing around. And on this occasion, by the way, we were quite unlucky, but yeah, didn't really cost us an arm and a leg. And yeah, we're done with the ghouls here, which was quite an easy fight, to be honest. But yeah, fighting hordes of ghouls and everything, okay, I just thought that was yet another mole rat. Yeah, fighting ghouls and weaker mobs in high amounts, that's where the weapon really shines, because as you can imagine, we still have relatively high vats action point cost compared to something like an automatic rifle or so. but due to the fact that we do have Grim Reaper Sprint, it's actually efficient enough so when we're fighting stuff like ghouls and so on, we can actually get away with vats for pretty much all of the time. We don't really have to worry about having to make pauses and refreshing our action points. It's going to be a little bit different when we're fighting these guys here, just because they are a little bit tougher, and on average I would say we need like 2 shots to take them down, factoring in criticals and our executioners in fact and everything. But yeah, that's about it. Now another big thing about this weapon here, which makes it very nice for us, is the big ammo capacity. So it's arguably even too big. You will see me, or have seen me, reload unnecessarily for quite a few times at this point. That's just something I'm always doing, like prematurely reloading, but that's just something you have to live with. Just keep in mind, you can probably spare like 90% of the reloads in this video. And here you can see when once Gunfu really takes off, yeah, you can actually just mow down enemies. Sometimes it happens and it's very, very satisfying, I would say. Really is a lot of fun. Here we can see in close quarter situation, we occasionally need some time to bring down an enemy, but still it's only like 5 shots of 5mm ammo or something like that, and in the meantime we're not going to take a whole amount of damage. So overall I had a blast with this build, had a lot of fun, one of my favorites in quite a while. It's probably not going to be the most satisfying one if you're big into big game hunting in this game, like taking down Scorch Beast Queen, Wendigo Colossus, all that stuff. Yeah, you would definitely want something a little bit more efficient. I would probably say just have a plasma caster somewhere in your inventory for those kind of situations. But other than that, you're pretty much good to go with this here weapon. Now, as a secondary effect, I do have Vats hit chance, which I yet again find quite important, just because as a nature of a a heavy gunner, there usually isn't a lot of useful perks you can use within perception. So your Vats hit chance is not going to be all that great, your accuracy isn't all that great either on the weapon. So unless you really want to rely on something like Sweetwater Special Blend Tea or something, you should probably invest into Vats hit chance. Yet again, it's something I have experimented with a little bit with another weapon. The one I was earlier mentioning had better Vats crits rather than Vats hit chance. And while it worked well in most situations, you still found yourself missing a lot more shots than with Vats hit chance, which is quite obvious. And I found overall that the benefit from hitting more reliably was better on this occasion than anything like faster fire rate or better Vats crits would have been. So that's why I decided to ultimately go with this effect. And I didn't really think it was a bad decision. So here yet again we saw Gunfu in action, and I mean it's always a nice way to show it off, this little narrow pathway here. Despite the Deathclaw not being the most tanky enemy in the game, it still is among the tankier, I would say. So yeah, it's always a nice thing to show it off here, the Gunfu. And here we have a few more super mutants. These are level 50 guys, level 60 in between, so nothing too crazy. Maybe we can chuck another Nuka-Cola. By the way, I'm using Nuka-Cola Orange, which just comes from the fact that I do have the Nuka-Cola Collectron activated in my camp, which is something I would definitely recommend. One of the best camp items in my opinion, just because of how overpowered Nuka-Cola can be. Obviously you want to go for something like Quantum if you really want to maximize your bang for your buck, but yeah, Nuka-Cola Orange was one of those I had a substantial amount of at the moment, and that actually gave me a good use. I also have Nuka-Cola Cherry on me, but it's like half as efficient when it comes to action point refresh compared to the Nuka-Cola Orange, so that's why I went with the orange version. So here again, we can see quite a lot of damage. Now one thing we want to keep an eye out for is the Suicider, because on this occasion I neither have, and here you can see it, I neither have fireproof nor a dense chest piece. I will explain that a little bit later. There's not really an explanation for fireproof, I just didn't use it on this occasion. But yeah, that means you have something to look out for. Like, explosions can actually be quite dangerous for once, other than on 99% of my characters, where explosions are basically just happening without bothering us to any degree. And yet again, we are kind of shot with explosives, and I'm not quite sure why. Usually super mutants aren't too bothered with throwing explosives. Maybe someone's around with a missile launcher. No, this guy here was throwing grenades at us. But as you saw there, it's not like we get one hit or something. We can still survive it pretty easily if you just keep an eye out a little bit. And yeah, this is the part where usually I say I'm done, and then there are like 2 or 3 more enemies. Okay, here we have a hound, which shouldn't be too much of a problem. Also not a big problem if he hits us, because we actually do have blocker on, so makes their bites pretty important. I mean, pretty important is a bit of an overstatement, but you get the point. And I still hear combat music, and alright boy, you're quite off the beaten track on this occasion. Coming at me with a super sledge was probably not the smartest idea this guy had, but he learned his lesson, I'm pretty sure. And yeah, overall I think we're done with the gameplay part. Maybe 1 or 2 more are going to be here. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it so far. I certainly did. And now we're going to take a look at a bit more in-depth stuff when it comes to this build, starting off with our effects. And on this occasion it's a bit more interesting than usual, because other than the mutations, we do have a few buffs going on here. So we can still see that we do have a little bit of a buff from Nuka-Cola Orange, but that's nothing I want to talk about. The more interesting part here is corn soup, which in and of itself, yet again, isn't too crazy. But I included it here because what I have done on this character is I have only used Action Boy in terms of action point refresh. Usually you often find me, on vats characters at least, find me using 1, 2, up to 5 pieces of powered gear, just because it's so good, giving you extra AP refresh, and I really try to invest a lot into action point regeneration. On this occasion, as I said, I just have Action Boy and that's it. And a little bit more I'm doing with corn soup, which is one of my favorite consumables for the simple reason how easy it is to craft and to keep stock of. It's just corn and water basically, as you can imagine. And yeah, it gives you extra AP refresh. It's not the world, but it definitely makes a difference, and it's super easy to maintain. And on the other side, we do have the herbivore mutation, which you can see if you look down there. So it's actually a little bit more potent than usual, and on top of that it fills hunger and thirst. So on top of just giving us extra AP refresh, we are also fully hydrated, which yet again gives us more AP regen. So yeah, we're basically benefiting twice from this corn soup, just because it keeps us well hydrated very easily, and it also gives us AP refresh on top of that. And yeah, for that reason it's one of the easier things you can use. Now, one thing I haven't really shown off is I do have popcorn with me, which was recently mentioned in a comment by you guys. And yeah, brilliant consumable. I think it's a bit more easy to use on PC, just because you can just spam the quick wheel. On PlayStation it's a bit harder, just because you have to open your menu and use it multiple times. If you do though, you can actually refresh your action points very fast as well. Basically this works pretty much as well as a lot of the Nuka-Colas, but it's way easier to get. And as you can see there, I have like 80 of them, and I'm not even owning the popcorn machine, which is something I felt like noteworthy of mention, because with a lot of the stuff you can produce in your camp, people tend to lock it behind behind a log. With popcorn, I found that it was relatively easy, especially if you are vendor hopping, which is something that would actually work pretty well with the whole theme of this guy, being kind of a caravan merchant. Yeah, you can get a hold of a lot of popcorn very easy. So yeah, that's something worth mentioning. And that all being said, we can now take a look at our mutations. So it's basically the bare minimum when it comes to a vats character. Bird bones and eagle eyes, very straightforward. Extra agility for a little bit more action points to use. Then we do have eagle eyes. Better crit damage is self-explanatory, and bit better perception. As I said, the most of our hit chance is done by our legendary effect. With that alone, you don't really have to invest a lot, but still, a little bit more perception, we're going to take that without a worry. And yeah, that's basically the bare bones combination here. On top of that, we do have Egghead here, which is just a leftover from another build. On this occasion, I would actually not bother to use it because the debuffs are actually kind of bothering to us, especially the endurance. When it comes to strength, we do have relatively good carry weight, even though we have quite a lot of strength debuffs, but we're not using it particularly for our damage output, so carry weight is really the only thing affected by the debuff to strength, so I didn't really bother to incorporate Class Freak here. The only downside with our mutations is endurance, which is kind of a problem. Well, not a problem. It's kind of bothersome just because I wanted to have relatively high endurance, which I actually managed to do using a combination of under armor, a few legendary endurance, which is on our armor pieces, and having relatively high endurance to begin with. So yeah, the endurance part is a little bit of a downside, and as I said, I wouldn't worry too much with Egghead. It's just a leftover here. Now, the more interesting part here is herbivore, which means vegetarian products do give us twice the benefit, with the cost of meat-based dietary not having any benefit to us. But really, if you pick one side, there's no real reason to use anything else other than veggies, or if you use carnivore, meat-based stuff. So it's not really a downside in my eyes, and especially once you're using something like a vets build or so, herbivore is the better option in my eyes. You have more options that really are benefiting you. Another thing I could have used, which I didn't really bother, I think I actually have it on me, is Blight Soup, which gives you extra crit damage, quite a significant amount, 40% or so, I think. Let's just see, I'm pretty sure we do have it on us. Where it is? Yeah, there, we do have Blight Soup. So yeah, 40 extra crit damage, lasts for half an hour or so. So yeah, yet another buff I could have used, would have been quite crazy, but yeah. That being said, we do use herbivore, just a good idea for a vets character. And lastly, we do have Marsupial and Speed Demon, because we always have. They just make moving around easier. Now, Speed Demon on this occasion, we do have extra reload speed, which is nice, but you will pretty much never find yourself in a situation where you have to reload within combat. Really, the only times I did it was when I was basically waiting for my action points to refresh anyways. So yeah, you have 250 rounds in a single magazine, and you can even go up to 500 by using a drum magazine. I just didn't want to bother for the simple reason that it makes the weapon a little bit heavier, and I just think it isn't necessary at all on this occasion. Which I think if you taken a look at the gameplay, you can agree with me. More than 250 isn't necessary here, but if you want to go for it for style or anything, just do it. It's just a little bit more weight to your weapon. And yeah, that's it when it comes to our mutations. Now, a bit of a noteworthy mention here is I thought about including healing factor, which could have been nice, but I didn't really find it too necessary. And the other thing I would have definitely done is using grounded to give us 100 extra energy resistance for the cost of doing less energy damage. There's two reasons I didn't include grounded here. The first one being that, yeah, as I mentioned, if you really want to run with this character, you might find it necessary to keep a plasma caster with you for just tougher targets because it's a little bit more efficient. I didn't really intend to. I think you can do everything with the gatling gun. It just might be a little bit too slow for you on certain situations, and the more pressing reason, and probably the real reason here, is that yeah, I'm on a character that has 700 caps to its name, which is a little bit counterintuitive to the whole theme of being a merchant, but no one ever mentioned we're a good one, right? And yeah, I'm on a custom world as it's usual with my builds, just to do the fine-tuning. You know, I'm doing a lot on live servers, and then for the final review I'm going into a custom world just so I can mess around with scrapping a lot of my perks to get access to extra legendary perks and so on and blah blah. But the main point here is, yeah, I don't really have access to the mutation serum. That's pretty much everything I wanted to say here. So yeah, I can only craft mutation serums on my main character, so transferring it here is not an option anymore because I forgot that. And on top of that, I can just go into the White Strings bunker and buy it. Now I could have gone through the whole process of crafting 1,000 mole miner pails or something and hope that I get my caps up, but that includes like half an hour of dropping stuff I don't really need, 15 crashes, and a lot of nerfs, so I didn't really bother. But keep in mind, we could have been a little bit more tanky when it comes to energy resistance. That was a mouthful. So going over to our equipment, here it is, basically the weapon of the day. So we do take a look at an Executioner's better vats hit chance, less vats action point cost gatling gun, and yeah, I think I'm pretty set on 50% vats hit chance and less vats action point cost. These two are, in my opinion, the best ones to go with this build. As I mentioned, you can go with other stuff, but really I think those give you the best bang for your buck. Funnily enough, the least interesting thing for this build here was the primary effect. Now obviously it can make a big difference. Having something like, well, Ghoul Slayers or so would just be dead weight, but for example, I would prefer a Ghoul Slayer's vats hit chance, vats hit chance, less vats cost gatling gun over an Executioner's faster fire rate, faster reload version, to give you a point of reference here. When it comes to the first effect, Executioners, that being said, it's still very good. I still enjoyed it a lot. Other options that could be interesting would be anti-armor, as always, but yeah, I tend to not use it in every single video just because, yeah, it's a very good all-rounder, but it gets boring to always just use that. Then obviously, if you want to make this a bloody character, you have to factor in a whole lot of other stuff, so obviously bloodied would be good, but would not really work with this character as is. However, it would make for a very good Vats heavy gunner. Anti-armor, yeah, as I said, and what also could be good on this occasion is instigating, which was actually on the other weapon I tried to fool around with. Would have been interesting for ghouls and stuff, but ultimately it falls flat just because it really doesn't help in the situations where this weapon needs most help, which is tankier enemies. And yeah, therefore I think Executioners is actually a pretty good pick on this occasion. Talking about the modifications a little bit here, the speed receiver was a little bit of a no-brainer here, just increasing our fire rate, and I'm pretty sure it also brings down our action point cost, but that could be wrong information, keep in mind. But yeah, it was just beneficial. Let's stay there. Then we do have a long barrel, which just increases our range from, I think it was 120 with the short version, to 204, so an increase of around 80 to 100, something like that, but it's significant. So I obviously wanted to have that. Now I was interested in seeing if maybe the short barrel has some benefit to our action point cost, because it actually has a little bit more accuracy than the long version, but I didn't really see a difference. So there might be one, but it's definitely not too noticeable, and therefore yeah, long barrel it is. Then in terms of comfort grip, I didn't really think too much about it just because it is the only modification and I wanted to have it, and I'm pretty sure that yet again it gives us a little bit better action point cost. And in terms of the magazine, I already explained why I didn't went with the bigger version, And lastly, we do a frontside ring because, yeah, obviously for accuracy reasons and yet again AP reasons, a sight is never a bad decision. However, it's not a reflex sight, so I wouldn't set my mind too heavily on that. No, that's not going to be a sentence. I'm just stopping here. Going over to our armor. We have a full set of heavy radar armor, which looks kind of hideous if we take off the outfit, by the way. So there it is. We're quite a rust bucket. Now you can work around this visuals, I guess. I done in the past, but I always find it a little bit too bulky. Anyways, there's no particular reason I went with this. The only one being that I have the only Sentinel set I do have is a very old Assassin Sentinel set that I made like half a year after the game dropped. And yeah, it happens to be heavy radar armor. So yeah, I played with that on the main server until doing some reconfigurations on the custom world, but yeah, I didn't really bother to change the set itself. So that's why we don't have too high of resistances, but we have factored in some perks to help with that. And in terms of effects, we do have 2 Exterminators pieces, 2 Troubleshooters pieces, 1 Ghoul Slayers piece, and all of them have the Sentinels effect. 3 of them have Endurance, 1 has Strength and 1 has Endurance. So nothing too crazy going on here. Really the more interesting part was the Sentinel set, because I think it works rather well with heavy weapons, where you tend to, or at least can get away with just standing still and picking your targets while using vats especially. So yeah, that's why I wanted to go with Sentinel. I didn't really show that off, at least as I can remember ever before. And yeah, the last noteworthy thing here is, other than the butt rest modification for the best resistances, I went with deep pocketed on my limbs, just because carry weight was a little bit of a problem, but isn't anymore. And the chest piece has the pneumatic modification, not quite sure where the chest piece is, there it is. The pneumatic modification to reduce incoming stagger, because that infers a little bit with your Sentinels effect. So if you're staggered, the Sentinels effect doesn't kick in. So reducing stagger is a nice thing on this occasion. As I said, you could also go for dense, just to really remove the threat of explosives, but we can also use fireproof on a certain when it comes to our perks. I'm going to talk about that in a minute though. The last noteworthy thing here is maybe the visuals. So I went with the Blue Ridge Caravan gas mask, the Caravan Trader outfit, which is an atomic shot item, but I think they work very well together for the simple reason that the cloth on your chest is blue as well as the face of the mask. So I think it works pretty well together, not mentioning how obviously both are Caravan related. So that was kind of a good thing. And I wanted to go for this bulky appearance, having this big ass gatling gun on me, combined with the Chelly the Moo backpack, which really works for a merchant in my eyes, for a Caravan guy, for the simple reason that I always have to think about the water merchants. So this guy is basically a pack Brahmin on steroids, which is really cool. I like the appearance a lot. And yeah, last thing of note, we do have a chemist's backpack, so chems are reduced, and we do have Secret Service under armor, just to give us a little bit of extra strength and endurance. Basically the endurance kind of negates the debuff from the Eckhead mutation, and a little bit of extra perception, which is nice for all vats gameplay, but not too noticeable here. And strength, yet again, just removes at least a little bit of the debuffs to strength. So yeah, you could go with radar under armor just to give you yet again a little bit more agility and so on, which would benefit you when it comes to your action points. But on this occasion, yeah, I wanted to rather have a little bit more tankiness, and that's basically it. So that all being said, I think we can now move on to our perks. Starting off with strength at 8. So as you can see up there, we do have bandolier, because obviously we do use ballistic ammo. Carrying a lot of that makes it a bit of a burden. Now this is actually one of those builds where you can get away with not using bandolier quite easily, just because 5mm isn't too heavy. It's actually one of the lighter ammos in the game, and you actually don't have to carry a whole lot of it. So you can easily get away with packing 1,000 or 2,000 of it, which without bandolier I would guess is something like 2 or 3 pounds, sorry, which makes it a burden you can actually live with quite easily. So you can get away without using bandolier and just use more perks when more points in heavy gunner as you wish, but I went for bandolier just because I always find it like easier. And then as an expert we do have blocker. Blocker is always a good choice in my eyes for defense. It's one of the better defensive perks. The bang for your buck is heavy, so 45% less damage from melee attacks is huge. Now it's, if you're playing your cards right, melee enemies usually not really get too close to you, but there's a good possibility that you get swarmed by ghouls or something like that, and therefore blocker was a good choice. But yet again, you can live without it in my eyes, and just yet again put more points into heavy gunner if you wish so. Speaking about heavy gunner, I only went with the first rank in each of them, giving us 10% extra damage for each card, adding up to 30% additional additive damage. So not the world, but it's not a lot of investment either. As I said, you can easily pump this up. Now, when it comes to heavy gunner perks, there's actually not a whole lot that was useful here. Obviously, there's the one, I can't even imagine how it's named because I never took it, that gives you extra resistances while aiming with a heavy gun, which we're not doing. We're using it in vats, so that's completely useless. Then we do have lock and loaded, which improves our reload speed, but for the same reasons why I didn't really bother to put a drum magazine on this thing. That would also be a waste of points in my eyes, just because you're reloading so little, so few times, that it's just not a problem you have to invest perk points into. And lastly, bare arms could have been nice. If you really have a problem with carry weight, you could think about it, but I think, yeah, I mean, this is not something like a one-gun army character where you want to carry a whole lot of weapons with you, for the simple reason that this kind of playstyle doesn't work with a whole lot of different weapons. As I said, the gatling gun is a very good option. Another very good option would be the plasma caster, and basically the last heavy weapon I actually think you can or should use in VATS is the harpoon gun, but there it kind of stops. Now you can get away using something like the LMG or the 50 cal with VATS, but that would certainly need a character that's specialized way more into AP refresh, in my eyes at least. I have done that before, not quite sure if I have done it with a 50 cal actually, but it's workable, it does work, but yeah, as I said, not with this character. So therefore, yeah, you're not going to carry a whole lot of different weaponry with you, and that's why ultimately you don't need bare arms either. So really the only investment you want to do is some in damage. Obviously, the more you invest, the more damage you get, especially if you have access to more legendary perks and so on. You could actually pump those numbers up quite a bit, but I found that, yeah, the main portion of our damage comes from using it in VATS, significantly improving our damage by hitting weak spots all of the time. So I didn't really find it necessary to invest more than these 3 points here. Going over to perception, the one and single one perk I actually wanted to have definitely here is concentrated fire at rank 3, just to give us good VATS hit chance over time, and yeah, have at least the opportunity to target weak spots. That was obviously very important, especially on a VATS character. You always want to have at least rank 1 of concentrated fire. That being said, that we could have stopped. I also included glow sight, which is a very situational perk, but yeah, having a little bit more endurance doesn't hurt. As I said, doesn't make a world of a difference. You can easily get away, yet again, not using that, but moving those points into strength and yet again putting them into heavy gunner. Probably even the more sensible option, but for me, as you can see there, I'm not swimming in level ups, At the moment, that would have meant 3 more level ups, 2 now, to invest that into heavy gunner. So I went with glow sight and perception, but yet again, not too necessary here. What you want to have is concentrated fire. Then we go over to endurance, which is at 14, so relatively high. A lot of builds in this game, you will see people use endurance as a dump stat, coming from the fact that, yeah, a lot of people are bloodied builds and already are a glass cannon, but still, the importance of endurance shouldn't be overlooked. If you want to make a tanky character, endurance can help a lot. Now, always defensive perks are giving you more than a little bit of extra endurance, but in a perfect world you want to have both. What I went for is Ironclad. I'm saying this every time I'm using stuff like Ironclad and Evasive. Usually, yet again, people will tell you that these kind of perks are trash because it's quite a lot of investment for just 50 damage and energy resistance, and always the better option is just to go with endgame armor, talking about Secret Service or Brotherhood of Steel armor, the recon armor. If you have a full set of those with good effects, or at least modded out, they pretty much are enough so you can get the best bang for your buck when it comes to resistances. But since I'm not using those but try to use different kind of armors, when you're using something like I'm at the moment using radar armor or robot armor and stuff like that, then yeah, these perks aren't too bad. 50 damage resistance more or less can make a lot of difference if you're under 300 or 350 damage and energy resistance. So yeah, therefore I still think Ironclad is not a bad perk here. Then we do have Adamantium Skeleton. This is rather simple just because I hate to have a leg crippled during a game or something, and also on this occasion, if one of your limbs gets crippled, that means you get staggered, and as I said with the pneumatic chest piece, being staggered breaks our effect from Sentinels, and therefore yeah, having Adamantium Skeleton on was quite a must-have for me. And the last 3 perks here are Rejuvenated, Photosynthetic, and Cola Nut. Now, Cola Nut, I already explained during the video. There are definitely situations where we will run out of AP, and Cola Nut just makes it so with the Nuka-Cola Collectron especially, you just have to carry a few Nuka-Colas with you, Quantums at best, and yeah, these will just instantly refresh your action points, so you don't have to worry about that. And then we do have Rejuvenated. This one here just improves the benefits you get from being well fed and hydrated. So both of them are actually quite useful, giving us a little bit more action, more health points, which makes us more tanky, and especially the well hydrated one, which improves our action point refresh. That's the big one, and as I said, it's really easy for us to keep us well hydrated. We also get a bonus from being well hydrated, just from the way we are being well hydrated, which is the corn soup. And if we are already well hydrated, well, we might as well improve the benefits from it. So that's why Rejuvenated is here. And that left us with Photosynthetic, just giving us a little bit of health regen, extra health regen over the day. Now, this is the one I wouldn't necessarily say is the best decision here. Now, if you have access to a little bit more legendary perks, so you can bring your endurance up to 15, that's the perfect situation where you could just swap out Photosynthetic and use Fireproof, which would be the most sensible option in my eyes. But you can also find other stuff. Now, one very good thing you could do is actually use the one in Endurance rather than, in Charisma rather than Endurance, where you give yourself extra Happy-Go-Lucky. It is no, not Happy-Go-Lucky. Anyways, there's a perk that improves your benefits from alcohol. It might even be in Endurance. Well, that's also a good use for these 2 perk points, just because you can then use Sweetwater Special Blend at full capacity to give you a lot of extra vats hit chance, but I digress. Going over to Charisma, we do have rank 3 of Tenderizer, because of course we do. It's always a good decision on pretty much every single build, with very few exceptions, and on this occasion it definitely helps. 10% multiplicative damage after our first hit on an enemy. That's huge, that's a good bonus we're not going to waste, so therefore Tenderizer was kind of necessary as always. Going over to Intelligence, rank 5, using Gunsmith. So it's definitely one of those builds where Gunsmith is just here for convenience. You could basically have better use here if you just reduce your intelligence to 1 and use those 4 perk points you now gained for Lone Wanderer in Charisma, just to give you a little bit more tankiness and action point refresh, especially the action point refresh. But as I said, I wanted to really showcase how good of an action point refresh you can get with just some very easy to gain consumables, and therefore, yeah, it still is 5 intelligence with Gunsmith for convenience. Just so our weapon doesn't break so easily. I mean, that was kind of obvious, but yeah, I just mentioned it still. Then we go over to agility, and this is actually very important. We want to have as much action points as possible for the simple reason that, yeah, the weapon isn't the most efficient in VATS. Now, it's a very good version when it comes to heavy guns, but compared to a rifle, pistol or something like that, it still is quite heavy on the action point consumption. So having a lot of action points to begin with is nice to have. Now, we do have Action Boy here, and as I mentioned, this is the only thing I took that really directly influences our action point refresh, and not by using consumables. So yeah, this was a must-have for me. I didn't really want to go down so far as to only live from the action point refresh we get from consumables. That would have been a bit crazy. Then we do have Through Hiker, basically the epitome of a Foodbuild perk. A lot of people hate it, but nowadays it's not as bad anymore. So yeah, people kind of got over the fact that Through Hiker exists, and yeah, on this occasion it's actually quite useful because pretty much all of our buffs come from consumables that are influenced by Through Hiker. So yeah, that's why it's here. Also fits very well with the water barrel on our back and everything. So yeah, Through Hiker was a must-have. Then we do have Evasive. Pretty much everything I said about Ironclad also works with Evasive here. And since we have our agility maxed out, we also get the maximum amount of resistance from Evasive, meaning 45 extra damage and energy resistance. Yet again, pretty good. Really keeping in mind, we are already at 95 extra damage and energy resistance from these 2 perks. So yeah, having not having these, we would really run around with 250 damage and 100 energy resistance, something like that. That wouldn't be too tanky, even with the Sentinel's armor, which isn't too crazy. So yeah, I really think on this occasion, if we're not having access to better armor, Ironclad and Evasive really work well together. Then we do have Gun Fu at rank 3, which always is nice when it happens. I do have a feeling that it is multiplicative. I'm not quite sure. It's rather hard to test, and I'm not here to test stuff. I'm here to play a game. So yeah, usually rank 1 of Gun Fu is enough, and probably you would be better off using rank 1 of Gun Fu and then invest 2 points into Adrenaline, but that's hair splitting here, so I wanted to have it maxed out just because it looks good. And if it actually happens that you can get it to work, you're really getting into a point where you start one-shotting super mutants with your Gatling gun, which is very satisfying, and therefore yeah, I wanted to have it maxed out. And lastly, we do have White Knight here. Yet again, one of these perks a lot of people don't really like. A lot of high-end players do swim in repair kits, so obviously if that's the case, White Knight becomes kind of useless. So you can just repair your stuff on the fly all the time. Maybe you're swimming in ballistic fiber and aren't bothered too much by repairing your stuff anyways. So if these kind of things are the case for you, first of all, you're probably not going to play a build like this, and furthermore, yeah, you can easily just use something like Adrenaline here. But for me, yet again, similar to Gunsmith, this is just a convenient thing. I do like to use White Knight whenever I'm not on a stealth character or a power armor character, at least when I have the points. And since I already had Tenderizer and I didn't really feel like damage was a problem for us, I didn't really feel like I needed to use Adrenaline here, which I'm really using very often, so therefore yeah, I could live without it. Then we go over to luck, where we do have Grim Reaper Sprint. I already talked about that during the video, giving us a chance to completely refill our action points, and it's actually quite important on this occasion just because it makes the gameplay more fluent. Then we do have better criticals, which is rather obvious. We are on a vats critical centered character, so improving the damage of our criticals is a must-have, no-brainer basically. Then we do have starch genes, which is rather obvious. We want to keep our mutations, not get any new ones, so this is a must-have yet again. Then we do have critical savvy, probably the most efficient perk when it comes to getting crits. Even if we're not having 33 luck and therefore get a crit on every second shot with this perk, we do get a safe crit on every third shot, which is already pretty good. So every third shot is a crit, that's something we can live with. And then we just have Four Leaf Clover and Psychopath, giving us a little bit more of a chance to get a critical in between. So as I said, we do get a critical every third shot. On the second shot we do have quite a good chance to refill our action points with that. Sorry, on the first shot after a crit. So we do have a good chance that our second shot after a crit is another crit due to Four Leaf Clover. And lastly, we had one perk point left. We could have used it for one rank of Class Freak or one rank of Bloody Mass. We could have even put it into something like One Gun Army to give us a chance to cripple, but I just thought, like, yeah, hell, why not use one rank of Psychopath for a 5% chance to refill our critical meter on a kill in vats, if we're not killing with a critical. So the chance is really low and it doesn't happen all the time, but it's yet again a little bit of an extra chance to get a critical, so we're going to take that. And all that being said, we're now taking a look at our legendary perks. So the boring ones right off the get-go are intelligence, perception, agility and luck. So all of these bring us up to the point where we are, so we get a little bit more perk points to use, more perks to use basically. The only exception here is agility, so that's at base 15 and is boosted to 17 with legendary agility, giving us just a little bit of extra action points to use. Then we do have what rats, convenience perk, just makes it so you don't have to bother with rats unless you are in a nuke zone. Obviously you have to think about something like power armor or so, but other than that, everything that's not a nuke zone or maybe radiation rumble, you can easily just not give a crap about rats, and yeah, that's why that is here. And lastly, we do have funky dots. After all, we are using a full set of armor, and we are actually pretty tanky. It's okay. As I said, a little bit of a problem can come from explosives, so that's something you keep an eye out for. And the only other thing that really felt pretty dangerous to me was spit from Mylar Queens or legendary Mylar Kings. Yeah, being worn down by damage over time is not the most fun thing in the world, and therefore funky dots is here. But yeah, that was it. I hope you enjoyed it, guys. Obviously, as always, there's room for improvement with this build, but the general premise of a vats heavy gunner outside of power armor using the gatling gun was the main focus of this build, and I had a ton of fun with it. And if you have ever used the gatling gun in vats and enjoyed it, just let me know, let me see what you thought about the build. And yeah, as always, I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time. Bye.